Wow. Welcome to FAB Conversations. I am Sonu Bhasin, and FAB is Families and Business. This is a platform where we have conversations about business, about people, and about family business. And even though I say it myself, these are very interesting conversations. So I urge you all, if you haven't done it already, to subscribe to my channel. It is free to you. Okay, then today's guest. I have with me today Iqbal Singh. Now, he may look young, but he is a corporate veteran with more than 3 decades of experience. He is known in the industry as an expert in financial services, payments, and consumer products. After starting work with Levers in Bombay, Iqbal has worked across Asia Pacific with Citi and GE Capital. And Iqbal is a travel enthusiast and a foodie. And currently, Iqbal is an angel investor and mentors young startups. So, welcome to FAB Conversations, Iqbal, and looking forward to the conversation with you. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sonu. A pleasure to be here.
likewise. So let's just get straight into the conversation. So, you started work with Levers, which has also been called the CEO factory. Now, looking back at your years at Levers, and now with the great advantage of hindsight that you have after so many years of working, what do you believe is that secret sauce that was fed to all of you for you to be future CEOs?
You know, Sonu, this is something one often thought about, and in fact, one took the model with me. I implemented it in my division in GE when I moved across.
Hmm.
If you look at the management trainee system,
Yeah.
now Levers is huge. It's a mammoth. It's right across the all over India. It means globally, but for us, it was all over India. But the way they selected the management trainees, and then not only the selection process, but the way they nurtured and groomed the trainees, giving them all the opportunities as well as all the inputs, was unique.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you were schooled in the business. You spent 6 months in the field,
Hmm.
going shop to shops, doing exactly what the salesman did. So you understood the business ground up.
Hmm.
And then you were given, senior responsibilities. You were then, you had the salesman reporting to you, and you grew from there, and so on.
Hmm.
They picked you, they, took punts on you, and they gave you amazing amount of responsibility.
Hmm.
And but it wasn't that they just threw you in. They
Hmm.
were also very, very supportive, and I think that was unique because the whole system was supporting you
The fact
and
that
growing
they
you.
gave you responsibility and the fact that they supported you no matter what you did.
I no, I think it's a bit of both. They gave you responsibility, right?
Hmm.
But it's not that they just threw you in and said, "Okay, now you go figure out what to do." You
Hmm.
had the whole
Hmm.
system over there that was
Hmm.
supporting you, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you had your seniors as well who were mentoring you,
Hmm.
even if it was unspoken. For
Hmm.
instance, when we joined Levers and you were sent out after the first 2 weeks, you were sent out into the field.
Hmm.
The first pieces of advice actually came from a senior of mine who was there, who was a senior in FMS, but
Hmm.
he gave you even as basic advice as what to do. He says every evening when you come back,
Hmm.
make sure you wash your socks and underwear because you will need it the next morning. Right? It was as basic as that, right?
Right, right, right.
So, and that taught you what to do. For instance, there was one day when yeah, we had no stock,
Hmm.
so I didn't go to do my 40 shops that day.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And lo and behold, the ASM landed up over there. He sought me out and he says, "Why didn't you go?" So I
Hmm.
said, "There was no stock. What do I go and do here?"
Hmm.
He says,
Hmm.
"All the more reason that's even more important for you to go. You have to go and talk to the retailers. You
Hmm.
have to keep your presence in the market going. You have to go and talk to them.
Hmm.
And, go and sit down. This is a great opportunity for you. You're not coming to sell. It's a great opportunity for you to get to,
Hmm.
interact with them."
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's little things like that
Hmm.
that taught you the importance of management. It taught you the importance of, how things are done and conducted.
Hmm.
And it was a tremendous learning ground.
Yeah, and actually, when you're talking about it, it baffles me that the young people passing out of these fancy MBA schools from India and maybe overseas as well, the last thing they want to do is sales, frontline sales.
Yeah.
And to me, with my great hindsight now, of course, I think it is, those initial 1 year or 2 years that you actually spend on the streets, going shop to shop, talking to people, selling stuff, handling objections, dealing with clients and dealers, wholesalers, or even customers. Now that's a learning. So I did it maybe for only a couple of years when I started my career. But the learning I had from then stayed with me
Stays
throughout.
with you. Yeah.
And for all the young guys and gals who want to be future CEOs, when you get that opportunity, go out and sell, spend time. And the best time to do it is when you're starting, because you're young, you have more energy, you have lesser responsibilities, you can do it. So this is one bit that I guess people should keep in mind. Levers, I guess, forced it, and so did a lot of other multinationals.
Yeah.
But now I think that practice has gone, and
No, no, absolutely.
it
You
will,
cannot, there's
yeah,
no better way to know the market. For
absolutely.
instance, for instance, there were 3 days in my stint. I did my sales stint in Gujarat. There
Hmm.
were 3 days where they actually put me with a retailer, not
Hmm.
to do the 40 talk calls, but they
Hmm.
put me with the retailer. By the
Hmm.
second day, the retailer had to go off. He left the shop with me. I was in charge. I was selling the thing. The whole retail shop was mine. You
Hmm.
know, and just
Hmm.
look at that. I said, "How can you do that? How can you trust me?" He says, "You're from Levers. It's fine."
It's
Right?
fine. Yeah.
And I ran that shop for 3 days. Now look at
Yeah.
the learning that you get over there. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And
and I've always enjoyed it. You go down, talk to the
yeah.
people down at the field level. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, that's where you get the pulse. And
Yeah.
talking about experiences on the field, I remember, in my initial, I was part of TS, and one of the projects I did was with Titan. Titan had just started, and I was put along with an ASM or equivalent, and I had to go all over Agra and some other towns, and they have display units of Titan. We had to talk to them. And this ASM was quite a surly guy. And we had those, we went in the ST transport buses, and I would sit and he would sit, and we didn't speak a word. I just thought that he was just so quiet. We entered the first shop, and I was getting prepared to talk, even though I didn't know, too much, because I was just a probationer, because I thought this guy wouldn't speak. And there was a transformation. He became this affable, extrovert, talkative guy. He knew everything about that dealer. They were having involved conversations. And that's when I realized that, a bit about your sales is also about a performance.
Yeah.
Uh, Not too much because you get caught out, but you don't have to be an extrovert to actually be successful in sales career or a marketing career. So good. This was so, the one takeaway I will take from this, because that's something that I believe in, is guys, go out and do sales if you want to be a future CEO. You cannot be a CEO, an efficient one, if you've just been a backroom person all through your life.
Yeah.
Now,
Either do,
yeah.
either do sales or you need to be out there at the front line. For instance, my next stint was when I was at the fertilizer division in Calcutta, in
Hmm.
Bengal,
Hmm.
right? It covered the East India.
Hmm.
I was a marketing manager,
Hmm.
but there was no need for me to go around. But any opportunity, whenever the ASM was going out into the field, or
Hmm.
we had a,
Hmm.
agri doctor,
Hmm.
whenever they were going into the field, I would just sit in the car and go with them.
And go with them. Yeah.
And go. You went down to the villages. You went and had tea with the farmers. You met the retailers. You do this. We would come back 2 days later, and my boss would say, "Where were you?" You know, I thought, "Oh, we just went to meet the farmers,
Yeah.
right?"
Yeah.
But the amount you learn, yeah,
Hmm.
and that stays with you. It stays with you till today.
Yeah, and the other thing that stays with the people, or it stays with me and with a lot of my other peers, is that when we were junior people and we had to travel, we didn't have these fancy allowances, and
Uh,
so we had to iron our own clothes. So,
yeah,
right from early days, I'm so used to just checking into a hotel and taking out the iron and ironing my sari. And today, even today, the first question I ask when I check in is there an iron and an ironing board in the room?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes there are company people with me, as part of the board, and so there is always somebody who's helping you. And they say, no, no, ma'am, you can give it to for ironing. I said, no. I
yeah,
mean, this is just part of my upbringing that you iron your own sari. And to me, again, that's a very good habit that has stayed with me.
yeah.
But Iqbal, moving away from levers, and then you with GE Cap and with City, you worked in different countries. You worked in Singapore, you worked in Bangkok and Seoul, and the people there are very different. Each country has its own culture. So just talk a little about the different cultures that you experienced, and did you have to adapt yourself working in different cultures? And also today, when the Indian managers are becoming more global, they have more opportunities to go out and work anywhere in the world. How can they learn to adapt themselves to work across different cultures?
Yeah. No, that's actually something I get asked a lot,
Hmm.
because one worked across both in the countries as well as in regional roles, so
Hmm.
cutting across the whole of the region.
Hmm.
Yes, cultures are different. You got right from the MCP culture in Japan and Korea, for instance, right,
Hmm.
to a very female dominated or more female dominated in Thailand and parts of Southeast Asia and so on.
Hmm. Hmm.
You've got different ways of functioning, different ways of collaborating, and so on and so forth. You've got to obviously get used to the nuances over there.
Hmm.
But sort of in the end, people don't change. People are the same. They're looking for the same kind of thing.
Hmm.
For instance, you support them, you help them
Hmm.
to grow. They know you've got their back, for instance, they'll do anything for you.
Hmm.
There's some basics that don't change. And as long as you can figure out what's important for them,
Hmm.
and they can see that you mean, you walk the talk kind of thing.
Hmm. So we just had a little blip because I think the light went off. So let's rejoin. And so, Iqbal, you were talking about the fact that across different countries and across different cities, people essentially remain the same. And that if they trust you, if they know that you do what is right for them, they will support you. But the key question then is, how do you make them believe? Because A, they're different cultures. B, you may not speak their language. They may not speak your language, and there's a lot that gets lost in translation. So, how can you build trust? How can you let them know that the objectives are aligned?
Yeah. A couple of things that become important over here. One is the level at which you go in.
Hmm.
So, for instance, in Japan and Korea, if you go in at the mid level,
Hmm.
uh, they're not going to listen to you because they are so top-down driven that
Acha.
everything is going to come from the top.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a struggle then getting anything done. Language you work out because a lot of them actually either speak English or in most of these places, like in when I was traveling or even when I was based there, I had interpreters or simultaneous translators with me.
But the problem, Iqbal, sorry, is that
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't understand each other's language, how do you know that the interpreter is interpreting the right thing? You may be saying, "Oh, you're a good guy," and that guy may be saying, "Your boss hates you." How do you even know?
No, you can kind of read body language and you can make out. It was the same problem I had, for instance, when I was roaming the villages of Bengal. In the
Huh.
beginning, I didn't speak the language, but you could begin to make out nuances and you could begin to make out, you pick
Hmm.
up a few words here and then you begin to make out.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when I was back with City for in Korea, for instance, the team spoke English.
English. Hmm.
So most of my team spoke English, so it wasn't a problem. It
Hmm.
was when I was interacting with the clients or somebody outside or interacting with the retail bank that I did need the simultaneous translator.
Hmm.
Japan was a different problem because Japan almost nobody spoke English,
Hmm.
and you had to wear the sets and
Hmm.
conduct everything. So it slowed it down a bit.
Hmm.
Because you came from the region and you came from a position of relative strength,
Hmm.
uh, they listen to you. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean it's like Indonesia, for instance. Indonesia will listen to you, nod their heads, and say everything, say yes to everything. And you go back a few months later and find out that they've done nothing. Right? They've done absolutely nothing.
Sound a lot
So
like us Indians.
not like that.
Yes, sir.
No, no,
Yes, sir. Three bags
no,
full,
in
sir.
India it's slightly different because over here, you go back a few months later and everything's changed. They haven't listened to you, but they've done whatever they wanted. You know,
Yeah.
so you learn to recognize some of those differences in the cultures, and
Hmm,
then you learn to deal with them. For instance,
hmm,
you take Japan.
hmm,
Japan is people are very reluctant to, and I'm giving these examples because once you understand this, then you begin to understand the people, and you
hmm,
then figure out how to operate.
hmm,
In Japan, for instance, they're very reluctant to change the status quo.
hmm,
So, for instance, we had a company that had slipped from number one when we bought it. It was number five in the market, and we were trying to turn it around. And I was given that task.
hmm,
And people just didn't want to go out and tackle the other companies.
hmm,
Uh, they saw it as a fight, and which is not their culture. They didn't want to. They were very happy to leave the
hmm,
status quo.
hmm,
You
hmm,
know, and they said, "Why do we want to do this?" and so on and so
hmm,
forth.
hmm,
But once you understood that, and you knew that, like Indonesia or here, that they're not going to, you can say what you want, they're going to nod their heads and not do it.
hmm,
It then you change tactics.
hmm,
And what you did is you assigned responsibilities.
hmm,
Means got them to agree to a very clear pathways or very clear deliverables,
hmm,
which is
hmm,
fine. That's been tried before.
hmm,
But the key difference was you then had a follow-up system
hmm,
which held them accountable. And not only with me, I had every 6 weeks a call with the global head,
hmm,
where those who had accountability for deliveries
hmm.
had to present what they had done the previous 6 weeks and
Right,
what they were going to do the next.
right.
Now, with everything else, when accountability comes into play,
Hmm,
is when people realize that now it's no longer the thing that you nod your head and 6 months later you're, you're
hmm,
still making excuses.
hmm,
Because if it's not done, you
hmm,
know who to hold responsible, and things change dramatically.
hmm,
You know,
hmm,
so
hmm,
it's understanding those bits. In Korea, you went in near the top, and since I was MD over there,
hmm,
so you were in a position where the only other person above you was the country manager. So
hmm,
of course, if he said anything, they would disregard me. But once you built your ties with him, he left you alone,
hmm.
and then everything that you wanted or whatever they would do, right?
Hmm, hmm,
So Thailand Thailand is more collaborative.
hmm,
India is you keep getting asked this, and you ask that question as part of your thing. Uh, when I went to the region,
hmm,
is till then, when you were in India, of course, everything's fine. You're the greatest.
hmm,
But
hmm,
when you went to the region and suddenly you were sitting on regional calls with India, you
hmm.
then realized why.
Yeah. So when you sat on calls from India, you
Yeah,
realized
when
that.
you sat in the region and you held calls with India, that's when it began to hit you that Indians, why the region was not very keen to deal with India or to hold calls here, because in India nobody listens. They just don't listen. Right? Even before you finish your sentence, they're already jumping in with, they're cutting you off and jumping in and giving you 20 different ideas,
Right.
and they just won't let you proceed.
Hmm,
You know?
hmm, hmm,
So the other thing I used to say is the difference anywhere else in the region,
hmm,
if you went and implemented a change
hmm,
and you went back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years later, the process would be followed to the T.
hmm,
Right? There would be no change. You could go to any branch, any city, anything. The process would be followed to the T, right or wrong.
hmm.
In India, even before you've got your flight out, they've already changed the process. Right? And then every
Yeah.
branch, every city has changed it further and so on. You will not recognize your process when you come back a month later.
Hmm,
So
hmm,
it was, from when you were in the region, you realize it's very frustrating to deal with
hmm,
ourselves back in the country.
hmm,
And that is what, unfortunately, in spite of all our brightness,
hmm,
holds us back, because they can't deal with you. You
hmm.
don't want to follow the processes. You don't want to listen.
Yeah.
So that holds you back.
Yeah. But talking about processes and talking about changing, so yes, it could be frustrating for a multinational to see that the process is not being followed. But I believe that one of the reasons why sometimes family businesses or local businesses score over multinationals is because of agility. Because processes, no matter how well you construct them, have to be localized in order for them to succeed. Because, just culture does make a difference even while following the process. And local companies or, family owned or family run companies where decision making is faster, you are able to handle these little tweaks in the process that are or processes that is required. But for multinationals, I remember I did some work in Tomco, and my peers in Levers, they were saying that, in Tomco, you can sit across the table and change the whole logo of a new, of an existing product, a soap. But in levers, even to change a comma in a particular advertisement, you have to go all the way back to the head office and get approvals. So I'm not saying that, you people should go out and do their own thing, but there's also merit in saying if you recognize that there is some tweaking required, be a little more flexible to get that done. And processes should be self-correcting in a way if
Yeah.
that can work.
So no, I completely agree with you, but this is where the whole process, it's how you do it that makes a difference. For instance,
Hmm.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. You
Hmm.
lose, that agility or because people down there, are more familiar with the markets and they can see
Hmm.
how the processes you put in are affecting them or not affecting them or whatever, right?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
effectiveness of the same.
Hmm.
But when you have, in the multinationals, the couple of things that are important. One is governance. And
Hmm.
when you're dealing with
Right.
financial products,
Right.
and you've got
Right.
the risk profiles of financial products, you've got to follow the laws of the land, and
Hmm.
feels that he can do this in a better way. He
Hmm.
doesn't realize the ramifications are awaiting the company,
100% agreed. I
right?
mean, tweaking the process doesn't mean that you change the governance process or, play around with the law or tread on that fine line and step in the gray zone.
That's right.
Definitely not. I mean, let it
That's right.
not even be seen to be implied that I was talking about that. Not at all.
No, so I'm saying that is one of the things. The second is it's a question of, again, if you're listening, and this is where again a lot of us lack the thing. If you're listening, you will pick up on what these guys are trying to say, and
Hmm.
you will lead the change yourself.
Hmm.
Now
Hmm.
you can't have, for instance, Delhi following one process and Bangalore doing another thing and Calcutta doing yet something completely different and so on and so forth. You can't
Hmm.
have that.
Hmm.
So, but if you listen,
Hmm.
you will see the value of what they're doing. You will lead the change, and that is a far more healthy system.
Hmm.
This again, in fact, even when I was a management trainee, for instance, when I went to Calcutta, one of the first things that the guy over there told me, he says, because I was this young management trainee, you still were in the saying
Yeah.
that I know more than these guys or whatever, these lowly
Absolutely.
salesmen, right?
Hmm.
So, I asked for the daily reports, this and that, and I was saying, this is all, this we can do this in a
Yeah.
better way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then one of the senior ASM sat me down and said, hey, listen, I'm sure what you're saying is absolutely correct, and I'm
Hmm.
sure you have a better way of doing it. But first, my
Hmm.
suggestion to you, before you ask for any changes, sit with them and find out why they do things in the way they're doing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Don't make a change until you understand why it's being done in the way it is being done.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Once you sat down and took the time to do that, there's
Hmm.
very little you will change because you realize that they are, it's not just
Hmm.
the fancy changes that you're looking for
Hmm.
don't work down in the field.
Right.
So it's
Right.
those things, you can of course go in and change,
Yeah.
but unless you follow a little bit of basics, you'll have completely different things all over.
Yeah. 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 So, again, I don't mean that, five different people in office and, or five different offices in a country, each one works out their own process, but
Yeah,
situations change and therefore processes need to be tweaked and therefore,
completely,
and
completely
so
agree.
all that is a disclaimer. But
Yeah.
talking about your checkered career, you would have had times when you were like really successful, and also you would have had times when you were not successful. So, looking back, would you share with us any particular instances or stories that stand out in your mind even today? Being successful, not being successful.
Sure. In fact, let me start with the not successful,
Hmm.
because I think that defined who I became later on, right?
Really?
So I won't take names or whatever, but let's just
Hmm.
say, so I was in this company again, young hotshot or whatever,
Hmm.
and know it all.
Hmm.
And I saw the team members, I didn't see them as team members. I
Hmm.
really saw them more as they were there to implement whatever I was spouting out.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they were there to do, I was there to tell them what to do and think of, the
Hmm.
strategy, and all the bright ideas had to come from me.
Hmm. Hmm.
It degenerated very fast, right?
Hmm.
They no longer trusted me. They went into a clique behind me. They went and complained to the senior management and so on and so forth,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Now you were also at that stage of life where when you had your performance review,
Hmm.
you were pulled up,
Hmm.
and sure enough, you had your defenses. You rationalized whatever this was. You had your excuses. You rationalized,
Hmm.
and in your mind, you were fine.
Hmm.
And that's when I had a boss who was actually, he's one of the best people builders that I've ever had, and I owe him a lot for
Hmm.
my growth.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he stopped the review midway and he says, "Hey, stop." He says, "Stop rationalizing."
Hmm.
So I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're rationalizing. Stop it." He
Hmm.
says, "When you do that, hear yourself. You're not listening. You're not learning. You're
Hmm.
just rationalizing. And if you keep doing that, you're going to get absolutely nowhere."
Hmm.
Right? So
Hmm.
I went away and thought about it. Took a while for it to sink in.
Hmm.
But once it sank in and I saw what he was trying to say, I never rationalized it again. Right?
Hmm.
If you
Hmm.
made a mistake, you admitted it, you learned from it, you grew from it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that was a very important lesson that you learned. It completely changed my management style.
Hmm. Hmm.
Post that, for instance, every new assignment that I had,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
would walk into the room saying and open the thing with just two or three things. The first
Hmm.
thing I would say is that, hey, look,
Hmm.
inside this room, we are all equals.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
The only difference is that I have the power to get support for the team,
Hmm.
to bring risk, to get resources, to get support,
Hmm.
right? But otherwise, around this table, we equal. So let's deal with each other as equals, right? So my CEO title is only to help to get support and resources. The second thing I would tell them is that I'm going to warn you of one thing. I said each of you has a role, right? You've got a functional role. The day I know more about your function than you do, your
Hmm.
history, right? And that shook them up
Hmm.
because, hey, I was eager to learn and I would get into all the functions.
Hmm.
And it kept them on their toes because if I knew more than them,
Hmm.
yeah, they were in serious trouble because I said that, then why do I need you?
Hmm.
So that kept them really on their toes. And that helped to, build the team dynamics
Hmm.
as well as groom people because everybody was making sure that
Hmm.
they were up to the mark on what they were doing.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
third thing was that, apart from resources and growing them, I never, I had the backs.
Hmm.
So the mistakes were mine, but the credit was theirs,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I will still say that, that I could not have done even means anything that I have achieved in life without the team.
Hmm.
And this goes back to my sports days, where yes, I was captains of teams and so on and so forth, but you're
Hmm.
not a lone player, you're a
Hmm.
team player, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
unless you can grow the team and you can train the team and all of you are learn to play in sync together, there's no success,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that has governed a lot of my life after that. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but I would cover the backs. If there's a mistake, I would go up and you know have
Yeah.
a chat upstairs and say, "Hey, look, I screwed up. That's
Hmm.
fine.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm going to do about it."
Right.
Right. That
Right.
would keep the guys with me. Keep the I would get buy-in from the seniors and cover so they had the courage to go out and implement things,
Yeah.
which otherwise you would because you always everybody tries to cover yourself. But
Right.
here, when you know that the boss has got your back, you're not going to get screwed for making a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that gives them the courage to go out and do things.
Absolutely right. When you talked of accountability earlier, now if the boss takes total accountability and responsibility for the failure, it kind of liberates the teams below. I mean, if you need to, uh, berate someone for a mistake that they made, that is the internal department matter. But otherwise, I mean, upstairs, as we used to say,
Yeah.
the buck stops at you because you're the boss, and you better. I mean, if the boss does shabash to you, well, go there and listen to the earful as well. You can't then pull out your team members and say, "nahi, nahi, nahi, isne aise kara tha." Okay, so this was, something that you learned by figuring out that what you were doing was not right. What is one standout success that stays with you? Some moment of joy, pride, fulfillment, brings a
Okay.
smile to your face, even
It's
now.
linked. Both of them are kind of linked to this. I'll briefly talk about two things. I think one of the crowning glories was always and always will be is SBI cards, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, we GE was negotiating with SBI. The negotiations had broken down,
Hmm.
and I was in Bombay. I was given the responsibility, see if you can do anything about it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You had Raman Roy, and we had a lawyer, Raghuram Raju.
Hmm.
So they came to Bombay to hand over to me
Hmm.
and to introduce me to the SBI team,
Hmm.
right? So I met them at the airport, and as we were driving into town, so they said, "Okay, you tell us what to do, whatever."
Hmm.
And I'm not a cards guy. Raman is the expert.
Hmm.
Raghuram Raju was a legal expert. They've been holding these talks over there. You
Hmm.
know, I'm not going to go over there and stand over there and say, "Yeah, yeah, hand over and get the hell out of here."
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in the car, I said, "Hey, forget about whatever I've been given. We're a joint team,
Hmm.
right? All
Hmm.
three of us, we're a joint team. I'm here to help the two of you as much as you're there to help me. Now let's go and get the deal."
Hmm.
That completely changed the dynamics, right?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
went out and we got the deal. In fact, we got more than even G in the US expected us. And there's
Hmm.
a handwritten note somewhere over there which said that, can you
Hmm.
get this and this and this? And
Hmm.
our country manager said no. And then we got this, and this,
And
you know,
plus others. Yeah.
and plus others, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, and the whole journey from there
Hmm.
was, and these are little things that also teach you. For instance, when we finally signed the deal,
Hmm.
and we had the signing ceremony and everything. The next day, we took the book, the legal document, and gave it to Pramod.
Hmm.
Pramod looked at us and said, "Tear it up and throw it away." So
Hmm. Why?
we looked at him. We looked
Huh.
at him and said, we're thinking to ourselves, what's wrong with this guy?
Hmm.
But then he turned around and he said, look, that document is only as good as the piece of paper is written on. It's only useful if we go for a breakup.
Hmm.
Forget about the
Hmm.
document. Now go and make the JV work. You don't
Hmm.
need the document for that.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
just think about what he said. If you
Hmm.
keep referring to the clauses of the document, we
Right.
would have gotten nowhere,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we took that, we forgot about the document. In fact, I never saw it again.
Hmm.
And we built a JV with SBI as a partner. Um, Within a year, the first CEO left, and then they gave it to me. So I,
Hmm.
I built, the front end. Raman built the back end.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the relationship with SBI was again so fantastic
Hmm.
because, for me, my responsibility was the welfare of the JV,
Hmm.
not GE. And I think SBI recognized that. And I dealt with 6 SBI chairmen. They
Hmm.
recognized that I would only do
Hmm.
whatever would benefit the JV.
Maybe. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that trust that was built up, and I got full support from them, you know,
Hmm.
and
So I was going
you can
to
speak.
ask you, about that because
Yeah,
SBI and GE,
yeah.
SBI stayed old PSU type, GE, where I think the rumor was that 20% of all low performers were axed every year. So that was the corporate culture. How did the two JVs, how did people work together?
Now, so this is where the dynamics comes in is very important, right?
Hmm.
I actually saw it as an opportunity
Hmm.
because I could play one against the other,
Like how?
right? Yeah. So if SBI wanted something done, I would tell them G won't agree. If G wanted something done, I would tell them SBI won't agree. So I had a free hand by default, right? And it worked brilliantly. But then you took the trouble to sit with SBI. And, you know, now they were worried because obviously everybody saw SBI as this dodgy organization. I went to them and I said, I want 2 dozen of your people, right? And they were quite shocked. I said, no, I want 2 dozen of your people. And so they gave me 2 dozen people and I put them all over the country. But then I said, I'm going to do two things. These people I will treat with, they will get a full job. They're not only there as just token representatives, they will do a full job, right? The second thing I said was, I can't touch their salary, but in terms of travel perks, everything, they will be treated exactly the same.
Okay.
And I had a fight with the board on this one because no, SBI is not allowed. They can't go by plane. They can't do that. I said, I don't care. You can control their salaries, but to do the job, they will be treated the same as any other employee of the company. That went out very well with the SBI guys, right? Because your salary, they knew I couldn't do anything. But they were treated the same and they were brilliant. Sonu, they were absolutely brilliant. In terms of dealing with SBI's strength was their branches and the customer base. Now you got SBI guys who understand the system who are dealing with their own people. I picked up one of the senior most guy, and I put him in charge of dealing with all the queries that we were getting from SBI.
People themselves, yeah, branches, etc.
So this guy the poor guy's only job was to deal with all the queries that he would get, and he knew how to handle them, right? Then you figure out the system. For instance, they had a thing saying that you cannot, even for the JV, you cannot give salary increases. You have to bring it to the board. You have to do this and do that. So we did it 1 year, had a big fight, and this thing, it went around in circles. Then I went and caught one of the chief general managers, and I said, "How do I do this? I can't do this every year." So he said, "You're doing it wrong." So I said, "What do you mean I'm doing it wrong?" He said, "Don't fight for a percentage increase. Fight for a process." Right? What a process, get the board to approve a process and then follow the process every year.
Yes.
And that was it.
And therefore, the importance of following the process.
Right? So we got the board to agree to a certain process, and there was an automatic increase based on that process. It was
Right.
just brilliant.
Right.
You never had to deal with that again.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, but in this, there was one instance, for instance, when from one of the subsidiary banks of SBI, I got a better lending rate than SBI was willing to give me.
Oh, wow.
At the board meeting, the chairman freaked out. He said, "How did they give you this rate?" I smiled and I said, "So maybe they believe in me more than you do." So he laughed and
Yeah.
he let it go, right? But that rate stood. I got that
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you build relationships, you build this thing. Like I said, I dealt with 6 of the chairmen. I was probably the only non-SBI guy who was ever invited to attend the ManCom or the executive com. And I walked into that meeting and immediately somebody piped up and said, how's he here? He's not SBI. And the chairman said, he is SBI, right? And that was it.
Wonderful.
So that was the level of trust that you built up on the other side. And without that, you cannot run a JV, you cannot build this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, actually, Iqbal, the more people that I speak with on this platform, and we talk about a variety of stuff, but ultimately it just leads back to people. And, if you understand people, if you are able to win their trust, if you are able to build teams, in my words, magic happens,
Yeah.
and I guess every person who aspires for higher positions in corporate life, in business, in wherever, I think they cannot ignore people. So, what you've said just reinforces what I believe in, and also what everyone else has said. So much as I'd love to go on, I see that we are already well past our scheduled time. And really enjoyed this conversation, Iqbal.
Not that.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time. And maybe another day we'll do a different one where we'll talk only about food and travel. So maybe we'll just do that on another
I would love to.
platform. That would
Would
be
love to.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah. So thank you
great.
again. Thank you for your
Thanks.
time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sonu.